Welcome! Today Richard learns Tekhenu Obelisk of the Sun, a 1-to-4 player game by Daniel Ticini and David Turchi, published by Board and Dice. In Tekhenu Obelisk of the Sun, players take on the roles of nobles in ancient Egypt as they build both the Temple of Amun-Ra and the area that is to become Ipet-Tasut. On their turn, they will choose a die that is at the base of the obelisk. They can choose to perform a specific god's action based on the die's location around the obelisk, produce resources based on the die's color, or alter the die/action with a scribe. As the obelisk's shadow changes position, different die colors will become pure, tainted, or forbidden, changing how the die will sit on the player's scales when the time comes for Mat's judgment. There are 4 Mat phases and 2 scoring phases during the course of the game. While Mat phases only take into account the player's balance on their scales to determine player order and any points lost due to excess taint, scoring phases will require that they pay for the buildings they have built and provide victory points for the various god actions they have taken. The player with the most victory points wins the game. For this video, let's learn the 2-to-4 player game. So let's set the solo pieces back in the box. They will not be used this game. To set up, place the game board in the center of the play area. Next, let's set up the obelisk. We can see on the obelisk wheel that it has different sections: sunny, shaded, and dark. And on the other side, which dice are pure, tainted, and forbidden in those sections. The obelisk goes into the obelisk wheel, and then that gets placed in its section on the board. Set the wheel to any random location, just make sure these sections are lined up. The board is split into 6 main sections. There's Horus, where you will build statues. There's Ra, where you will build pillars into the temple. There's Hathor, where you will build buildings around the temple. There's Bastet, where you will increase the happiness of the people. Thoth will let you gain cards from the market. And finally, Osiris, where you will build buildings to gain resources and increase your allowed production value. Next, take the single timer scoring token and place it 1, 2, 3, 4 sections away from where the arrow is. And the 2 sand timer token and place it another 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces from that, or 2 from the arrow. Next, take the pillar tiles, shuffle them together, and place those by the board in the Ra section. Then take 3 pillar tiles and place them in the 3 pillar tile spots. The game comes with several tokens. Here we have our resource tokens: bread, papyrus, limestone, and granite, and the gold, which is a wild, so 1 gold can count as 1 of any resource. Then we have the non-resource tokens: faith, which can help balance your scales, and scribes, which I will get to in a bit. Set all the tokens by the game board. Next, let's place gold in its designated places around the board. Place 1 at each statue by the temple complex, 1 at each statue space above the workshops and quarries, and 1 to the side in the second row as well. For our first game of Tekhenu, let's leave the Horus tiles as they are. However, in future games, we can shuffle these tiles together and randomly place them to mix things up in future games. Next, let's set up the draw bag. For a 4-player game, use all the dice. For a 3-player game, return 2 gray dice to the box. They will not be used this game. Or for a 2-player game, return 1 white, brown, black, and yellow die to the box, and they will not be used this game. And whatever your player count, place all remaining dice into the draw bag. Now for each section around the obelisk, draw and roll 3 dice from the bag. Place each die in a row depending on which section it is in. So in this sunny area, black is forbidden. This brown is forbidden, and this white is pure. When completed, each section will have 3 dice. And we can see each section has its different requirements as to which colored die will be forbidden, tainted, or pure. Next, give each player a player board, and each player picks a player color. So now let's set up our player board. First, the 8 pillars will be left somewhere by the player board. So let's place our 10 buildings at the top of our player board here. Next, let's take the 6 statues and place them at the bottom of our player board here. Next, let's take our production markers and place them in the 2 spot of each track. Then for now, let's leave one marker by the player board and take the other marker and place it on the 10-point location of the score track. Next, let's take the population marker and place it on the 5 of the populous track, and place the happiness marker on the 2 of the populous track. Every player takes 1 gold and 1 scribe and places those in their play area. Let's set up our cards. If playing a 2-player game, remove the T16 technology card and the D20 decree card. Otherwise, shuffle each pile individually, then place the blessing, technology, and decree cards by the game board. Then in the beige section, flip over the cards indicated, so you'll have 2 blessing cards and 1 technology card. And because the population is in the red section, do so as well for the red section of the card market. And because the population marker has not yet reached green or blue, do not do so for the green and blue sections. Then each player gets 2 decree cards. Each player looks at their cards, chooses one, and places the other at the bottom of the decree deck. Next, take the starting cards, shuffle them together, then select a number and place them face up depending on the player count. For a 2-player game, select 5 cards. For a 3-player game, select 7 cards. And for a 4-player game, select 9 cards. Lay out the 4 destiny cards face up as well. Next, randomly select a starting player. That player will choose 1 starting card for themselves, and proceeding clockwise, everyone will do so as well. Once everyone has a card, starting with the last player who just took a card, they take a second card. Then the next player counterclockwise, ending with the first player choosing the final second card. Now let's determine who will be first player during gameplay. To do so, add up the initiative values on each of your starting cards. So we can see blue has the highest value at 16 total. So blue takes his mat marker and places it in the 1 on the turn order track. Orange had the next highest at 15, so they put it in 2, and purple had 6, so they go to 3. If players had tied, the one who would be higher on the initiative track is the one who had the highest individual card number. Then, in the newly established turn order, each player chooses a destiny card. Every player receives all the rewards shown on their starting and destiny cards, whether it's resources, buildings, or cards. So our blue player gets 3 gold and any 5 resources that are not gold. Our orange player gets 3 scribes, 1 gold, 1 limestone, 1 granite, 1 papyrus, and 1 bread. Our purple player gets to draw 2 technology cards, look at them, choose one, and place the other at the bottom of that draw pile. They then get to take the furthest left building from their player board and place it in the quarry as though they had rolled a 5, including the rewards that come with that action. And do not lose any happiness while doing so. Then either gain 1 populace or 1 happiness. For now, they will gain 1 populace. Although any cards a player has are kept secret from other players, keep your destiny card face up. It will be used later. Return your starting cards back to the box. They will not be used anymore this game. A game of Tekhenu takes place over multiple rounds following this pattern. 2 rounds is 1 rotation. 2 rotations is 1 mat phase. 2 mat phases is 1 scoring, and 2 scorings is the full game. Every round, players take 1 turn each in the order indicated on the turn order track. Every 2 rounds, the shadow of the obelisk will rotate. Every 2 rotations, a mat phase occurs where the deeds of the people are evaluated against the feather of justice, and players are rewarded or punished accordingly. Every 2 mat phases, a scoring takes place. After the second scoring, the game is over, and individual decrees are scored. Every round, players take 1 turn each in the order indicated on the order track. On your turn, choose one die from around the obelisk. It can be a pure or tainted die, but it cannot be a forbidden die. And you may not choose a die if you do not have the required resources to complete the action. You must choose a die to which you can complete the action for. Then, without changing the pips, place it on the appropriate spot of your player board. If you grabbed it from the pure row, place it on the pure scale. If you grabbed it from a tainted row, place it on the tainted scale. The next step is to perform an action. Do a God action or produce resources. Let's start with the God action. The Horus action lets you spend granite to build a statue. And how many granite is required is printed on each statue going from left to right. So your first statue would cost 4 granite. And where you build a statue depends on if you want to build a statue in honor of a god or for the people. We can see that for our first game, a 2 is a Horus action, but in the future, it may be something else entirely depending on setup. But for our first game, our Horus action will happen to be building a statue to Horus himself. This is, of course, the Horus section. We can see that for a 2-player game, 1 statue can be built, 3-player game, 2 statues can be built, and for a 4-player game, 3 statues can be built altogether. Our statues get built starting from left going right. And to build our first statue, we can see we need 4 granite. And as long as we have it, we were able to take that die in the first place. So we take our granite, place it back with the resources, then take your leftmost statue from your player board, and place it on an available statue spot depending on player count. And now, in the future, if anyone else takes a god action in that location, you get the bonus depicted next to it. And remember, for Horus, a slash means or, so you can grab a papyrus or a bread resource. And just to be clear, if you had built a statue to Osiris, you would take the Osiris bonus after another player takes that god action. In a 3-player game, also receive the bonus immediately after building the statue. In a 2-player game, you still get the bonus when another player takes a god action, but you do not for having built the statue. Instead, if you yourself take a god action, you may take a bonus as well. And if you had built a second statue to a god and someone took that god action, you would not get an extra bonus. You would still only get what was depicted, nothing more. And just remember, during a real game, your die is sitting on the scales, not on the board. This is just an example. If building a statue for the people, your options are the 2 places by the temple complex and 2 spaces above the workshops and quarries. And in this case, the die value does not matter. Always pay the granite value depicted, then place your statue in the depicted statue location and take the gold next to it. Do not refill the gold. Also, if you build a statue for the people around the temple complex and you have pillars in that column or row, you get 3 points per pillar. So in this case, blue gets 6 for having built that statue. Points will be awarded for building a statue when the time is right. A raw action will let you build a pillar in the temple complex. To do a raw action, as always, take a die and place it on your player board in either the tainted or pure section, and the die you took corresponds to which tile you may take. In this example, we are able to take the 1 die because we have 4 limestone to pay. Or of course, 3 limestone and 1 gold, or however many gold, as gold is wild. After paying the resource cost, you may orient the tile any way you wish and then place it in the temple complex. Then score a point per building per row and column, but not statues. So in this example, we have 1, 2, 3 bonus points, regardless of ownership. Then gain a point for every edge color of your tile that is touching another same color. So this blue edge of the tile matches the blue edge of the temple for 1 victory point. Then if later on a player matches this red edge to this red edge, they would get 1 victory point as well. If you were to place a tile in the corner of the temple, you would get 1 extra point per matching side. So in this case, blue and red both match. So in this case, they would get 4 points. Otherwise, placing our tile back where it was, you would receive the bonus it was on. So in this case, you would receive 1 granite. And of course, that just goes in your play area. Score 1 victory point per building, not statue, regardless of ownership, in the same row and column. Then also receive the point value above which tile you took. So in this case, our 1 gives us 1 point. So blue, in this case, would get 1, 2, 3 for 3 buildings, 1 for matching color, and 1 for which tile had to be taken. Finally, our tiles can be dark, sunny, shaded, or neutral. So let's say in our example, we chose a 6 tile, it is a dark tile, and Ra is in the dark. So we would also get, in this example, 1 extra bonus point. But the die we chose means we take this tile, and this tile is sunny, so we do not get the bonus action because Ra is in the dark. So we do not gain 3 population. With all that done, take one of your pillars and place it on your tile. The remaining tiles get slid all the way to the right and take the top pillar of the pillar stack and place it in the leftmost spot. A Hathor action lets you build a building around the temple complex. The number on the die does not affect where you can build the building. You just need to pay the bread cost to be able to build the building. Put the required amount of bread tokens back with the resources, then take the leftmost building and place it in your chosen spot. In this case, it's a 2, so one of the 2 spots. These bottom spots will only be used for a 4-player game, and the outer spots will be used for a 3 or 4-player game. In every game, the top row will always be used. Now let's say we just built a building here. You get 3 points per column in the row or column of the building you just built. So you would get 6 points for this. In addition, if the space is empty, you would gain a single of the depicted resource. So you would get 1 limestone from this and 1 bread from this. And let's say purple then built a building here. Well, they would get no points because they have no column there, but they would get 1 papyrus, 1 limestone, 1 granite, 1 bread, and 1 faith token. So in addition to 1 of each resource in each row or column that you just built your building in, and 3 points per pillar that is yours in each row or column you just built in, you also get to move up your population track according to the pip value of the die you chose. So in this case, the population would move up 2 spaces. And when the population were to reach the green section of the card market would then get filled in with cards. Specifically, the ones depicted on the board, of course. And of course, the first population marker to reach the blue section in 13 triggers the filling of the blue section. A Bastet action lets you increase the happiness of the people. So choose a die, then pay the cost of 2 papyrus, and then increase your population's happiness by the amount on the die. So in this case, increase by 2. And if your die has a value of 1 or 2, receive 2 scribes. A 3 or 4, 1 scribe, and a 5 or 6, 0 scribes. Your happiness marker can never be more than your population. So in this case, a 6 means you can only go 1, 2, 3 total. Any excess is lost. However, if this were the case, increase your happiness by 6 points, and the first time you get to 16, gain 1 gold. The first time your happiness marker reaches 19, gain 1 scribe. And the first time your happiness marker reaches 21 points, immediately take a second god action without taking a die. A Thoth action lets you gain 1 or more cards from the card market. If it's a 1 or a 2, gain 1 card. If it's a 3 or 4, pay 2 papyrus and gain 2 cards. If it's a 5 or a 6, pay 3 papyrus and gain 3 cards. Remember, you cannot do a god action if you cannot pay the resource cost. If choosing a blessing card, place it face up in your play area. Blessing cards are a one-time use card and says on the card when it can be used. Once used, put it into discard. And you can use more than 1 blessing at the same time. If choosing a technology card, place it face up in your play area as well. It will not be discarded when used, so it will provide an ongoing benefit. When choosing a decree card, keep it face down hidden from other players. It will give you extra ways to score points at the end of the game. When your happiness marker is in the beige section of the populist track, you may only take from the beige section of the card market. When your happiness marker has reached the red section, you may also take from the red section of the card market as well. When your happiness marker has reached the green section, you may also take from the green section of the card market. And when your happiness is in the blue, you may also take from the blue section as well. And you may only take cards based on where your happiness marker is. So if it's in green, you can take from green, but that means if you build a building in Osiris, for example, you lose 1 happiness. So blue is now unable to take green cards. One important note when taking the Thoth action is, after paying the full resource amount, the cards you choose must come from the same section. So if you went for the green section, you must take all cards from the green section. Before selecting which cards you will take, you can pay 1 papyrus to clear an entire section. You may choose which section, but all the cards must be discarded, and then refill. You can only do 1 section once per god action, however, you can do more than 1 section. If you ever needed to fill a spot on the card market, but there were no more cards to use, take the discard pile, shuffle it together, and use that as your new draw pile. At the end of your turn, refill the card market with the card type indicated. And there is no limit to the amount of cards you can hold in your hand at one time. An Osiris action lets you place a building in a quarry or workshop. Workshops and quarries require no resources to build, just the happiness of the populace, which decreases by 1, which means if your happiness is already at 0, you cannot construct. After decreasing happiness by 1, take your leftmost building and place it in the row indicated by the die you chose, so in this case, the 3rd row, and you may choose which spot it goes in. Where you end up placing your building will grant different bonuses. For example, if we placed our building in this spot on the 1st row, we would gain 1 papyrus and move the papyrus production marker on our player board up by 1. Of course, the papyrus regained goes in our play area and the papyrus production track moves up 1. If we build in the 2nd row, we gain the same bonuses as the 1st row, except if we were the first ones to build, we also gain the gold sitting in that row. The 3rd row gains the same resource, but increases 2 production tracks by 1. In the 4th row, you would gain the resource plus a wild gold, and increase 2 different resources by 1. In the 5th row, gain 2 of the specific resources, and increase the production track by 2. And in the 6th row, gain 2 of the specific resources, plus increase the specific resource by 2 and any resource by 1. So those are the main 6 god actions. Now let's talk about scribes, the 7th god Anubis, and producing resources. Let's start with scribes. When selecting a die, you can use a scribe to change the pip count by 1 or 2. So this 5 can become a 4 or a 3. Or it can become a 6, but it cannot wrap around. So the 6 cannot become a 1, it would stop at 6. Spent scribes are placed in their pile by the board. Alternatively, 2 scribes can be used to do an Anubis action. An Anubis action will let you take a die from anywhere around the obelisk, the only time you are allowed to use a forbidden die. You can then use that die to perform the action of any god. The only thing that matters is the number on the die. That is to say, if this 3 were to do a Bastet action, it would be required to do this 3 action specifically. And the die you chose does not go on the scales. Instead, it goes below them. And yes, you can use 2 scribes to do an Anubis action and use another scribe to change the pips. Now let's say you wish to produce resources. As you can see, each die color corresponds to a resource. We have black granite, white limestone, yellow papyrus, and brown bread. Gray produces no resources, so you cannot use it to. Nor can the wild gold be produced by anything as well. So as usual, choose a die, place it on whether it was pure or tainted, and produce the amount of the color of what it was. So yellow is papyrus, so 2 papyrus. However, if your number was a number higher than what is supported on your production track, the excess, in this case 2 extra, would go on the tainted side of your scale, regardless of which side the die is on. And once resources are on your scale, they are unusable. So you cannot spend them like you can your other resources. And those are the actions you can take when it's your turn. After each player has gone twice, so after 2 rounds, the shadow of the obelisk rotates 1 section. Then remove from the draw bag an amount of dice equal to the number of players, roll them, then place those dice in the first shaded section. Then repeat that step for the next shaded section. Finally, make sure all the dice are in their proper forbidden, tainted, and pure sections, because an obelisk rotation changes which dice are forbidden, tainted, and pure. Once the dice are properly aligned, continue on to the next round. After another 2 rounds, everyone will have 4 dice. And because 2 rounds have passed, rotate the obelisk 1 section, and because 4 rounds have passed, move on to the mat phase. So every 2 rotations, every time each player has 4 dice, a mat phase occurs. And the mat phase is when we determine the balance of the scales. Each die is worth the value of the die. So we have 6 plus 2, we have 8 on this side, and we have 6 for the dice value here, and another 1, 2 resources for a total of 8. So here the balance happens to be 0. Now let's say purple has 6 on the pure side and 8 on the tainted side. What purple is able to do is take faith tokens, because they have some, and place it on either side. So in this case on the pure side to help balance the scales. Now let's say orange has 8 on the pure side and 6 on the tainted side, but no faith tokens to help balance it out, for a balance of 2 on the pure side. Now everyone's turn order marker goes from the turn order track to the mat track. So blue had a balance of 0, as did purple. And orange had a pure excess of 2. Anytime a player has an excess of taint, they have a negative score. And anytime a player reaches -3, 4, or 5, they lose 1 victory point. If a player's balance is -6, 7, or 8, they would lose 2 points, and a balance of -9 or 10 would lose them 3 points. And it is not possible for someone's score to go below 0, so once they hit 0, it does not go back any further. Players' markers then get put back on the play order track, the first player being whoever has a 0 balance. In case of a tie, whoever has the highest value Ankh will go first. So purple goes first and blue goes second. After that, the next players to be placed in turn order are the 1s, then 2s, then 3s, etc. So of course, orange is going to go next, but if there was another player who was tied for 2 and -2, the Ankh would decide what player order it would be in. So anyways, 3 goes there. Once play order has been established, all players return the dice from their player boards to the dice bag. All tokens that were on the scales also get returned to their pile. And if any players had unused faith tokens, they also get returned to their pile at this point. You cannot keep faith tokens. And return all destiny cards to the center of the play area, and in the newly established play order, players choose which new Ankh card they wish to have, and receive the reward shown. Now we return to taking the number of dice out of the bag equal to the number of players, rolling them and placing them in the shaded area, and ensure dice are now in their proper rows. Then continue play for another 2 rounds, where the wheel will rotate again, refill the rows of the shadow area, play 2 more rounds, and another rotation happens, as well as the mat phase, as each player has 4 dice now, except once players have chosen their new destiny cards, the first of 2 scorings happens. To score workshops and quarries, the player who gets 3 points for that section is the one who has majority in it. So in this case, blue has 1-2 versus purple's 1, so blue gets 3 points. To break a tie, the player who has the highest most piece is the one who gets the 3 points. And a statue is in between 2 spots, and it counts as the highest most point for both of those spots. So of course, blue is going to get 3 points in this case, and to break the tie, blue has the statue, so it is the one who will get 3 points for this row. Score a point per building and statue per player. So blue gets 1-2 points, purple gets 1-2 points, and orange gets 1-2-3 points. Then score a point per player's column for each building and statue that is theirs in every row and column of that pillar. That is to say, this orange is going to get 1-2-3 points. This purple is going to get 1 point. And blue is going to get, of course, 1-2 points. Next, score 3 points per triangle your happiness token has reached. So orange would get 3 points, blue would get 6 points, and purple would get 9 points. For the sake of example, let's say this is our player board. To score statues, give yourself the point value on the rightmost side. So 3 points in this example, and of course 10 points in this example. Score 2 points for every track marker you have in this row. So this player would get 2 points. And if this were the case, they would get 4 points. As for the building row, we don't have any point values showing, but in this case, we would score 2 points. And finally, each player must feed their people the amount of breads showing under the buildings. If a player is unable to feed, or you can choose not to feed, you would lose 3 points per bread that you could not feed that you are required to. Remember, if it were to ever come up, you can never go below 0 points. Finally, remove the first scoring marker, then return to adding dice to the shadow area. Then continue on the game, remembering rotations and mat phase until you reach the second and final scoring. After regular scoring, it is now time for end of game scoring. So it is now time to reveal and score our decrees. A player can score up to 3 decrees total, but they can only score 1 of each type. So these are the same type, and these are the same type. Once you have chosen which 3 types to score, add that to your score. During end of game scoring, the player who was first in the turn order track gets 3 points. If this game had 3 or 4 players, the person who is in the second place scores 2 points. The players in third or fourth get nothing, and in a 2-player game, only the player who was first would get 3 points. The second player would get nothing. The player with the most points wins. If there's a tie, the player who has the most scribes is the winner. If there was still a tie, the player who was closest to first on the turn order track is the winner. And the rulebook has a thorough appendix to answer questions about tiles and cards you may have. Thank you for joining me to learn Tekhenu Obelisk of the Sun. Have fun! And I invite you to join me next time as I do a playthrough.